Hamas has released 3 more Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Eli Sharabi, Ohad Ben Ami and Levy are now back in Israel. The 3 men were abducted during the Hamas terror attacks on October the 7th of 2023. The Israeli government expressed outrage at their frail condition. More than 180 Palestinian prisoners have also been freed under the terms of the Gaza ceasefire agreement.
Thin, weak and pale. The 3 men appeared in much poorer physical condition than the previous 18 hostages released under a ceasefire agreed last month. They were forced to address crowds gathered at their handover ceremony, surrounded by dozens of Hamas fighters. Relatives and friends followed the release live. Champagne flowed as Ohad Ben Ami walked free, but his family had mixed emotions.
It's been very hard to see him like that. He doesn't look like himself. He looks like he suffered a lot for such a long time, not being at home. And it was very difficult for me to see him like that. Very, very hard.
Later, Ohad Ben Ami was seen reuniting with his wife, who was also taken hostage during the October 7 attacks. She was released in the first ceasefire deal in November 2023. Levy and Eli Sharabi were also seen reuniting with their families. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticized the state of the 3 men, vowing there would be consequences.
The shocking images that we've seen today will not go unaddressed. The government, together with all of the security officials, will accompany them and their families. The government of Israel is committed to returning all of the hostages and the missing.
In exchange for the 3 hostages' release, Israel freed more than 180 Palestinian prisoners. Many Palestinians released from Israeli jails during the ceasefire have also appeared gaunt and pale. They have repeatedly accused Israel of abuses and mistreatment while in custody.
The occupiers humiliated us over a 1.5 year period. They cut us off from the world. We haven't heard anything since the 7th of October.
The Red Crescent says 7 of the Palestinian prisoners released were taken to hospitals for treatment. With the 6-week ceasefire now at the halfway mark, families on both sides hope it will continue to hold until they see their loved ones return.
Let's talk to Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib, a Senior Fellow at the Scowcroft Middle East Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council in Washington. Great to have you with us at a time both sides have expressed outrage at the treatment and condition of those released. Should we fear these comments could escalate and put the deal in danger?
Precisely that. Unfortunately, the condition of the 3 released Israeli hostages in Gaza was indeed shocking to many Israelis who have questioned why is it that their government has waited this long for their release, or have questioned why has Hamas mistreated the hostages this way? Why has Hamas chosen to release hostages in the initial exchanges who look to be in slightly better condition than what we saw today? My concern as someone who's from Gaza, who has family there, who has lost a lot of family members, that this is going to further fuel the dehumanization on both sides, but especially of the people of Gaza who paid a heavy price for Hamas's terrorism, for Hamas's adventurism and suicidal nihilism. And one thing that we should pay attention to is the location today of where the hostage release was done. It was done in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, and that is the one city that did not see a full-scale Israeli invasion during the war. And so it's as if Hamas is signaling to the Israelis that we're still here, we still have our forces, we still have our tunnels. And many Palestinians in Gaza were looking at that with immense anger and resentment. I worry immensely about the charged emotions, particularly as we're about to enter negotiations for the second phase of the ceasefire.
So the next question being, where do you see negotiations going from this really difficult moment?
Well, this is the million-dollar question. Right now, we're at a phase where, and we saw Mr. Netanyahu announcing that Ron Dermer, his right hand, and it's rumored that people say in Israel that Netanyahu and Ron Dermer, his top confidant, share a brain. He's going to be heavily involved in negotiations for the second phase of the deal, unlike the first phase where we saw the head of Mossad, David Barnea, involved. And so what that means is that this is where the political issue, rather than the security and the technical issues, are going to be the dominant ones as the Israelis look to displace Hamas and attempt to dislodge it, or at least prevent it from being the sole authority and power in Gaza. But I can tell you that's not just an Israeli desire. That's a Palestinian Authority desire. That's an Arab desire on the part of the Egyptians, the Jordanians, the Saudis, and the Emiratis. No one wants to put a penny of reconstruction in Gaza with Hamas still in control. And yes, Hamas is weakened. Yes, Hamas is a shell of its former self, but it is still the sole party in Gaza that has a monopoly on violence. And so we're facing a really difficult situation and Hamas knows that. Hamas understands those dynamics and will be playing hardball during the negotiations for the release of remaining Israeli hostages. On the other hand, the government of Israel will be seeking to ensure that the next phase will begin to entail some kind of a departure of Hamas's top senior military commanders remaining in Gaza, or some kind of a demobilization, or some kind of an alternative to Hamas. So we have both parties wanting completely antagonistic goals. And so I'm not, unfortunately, optimistic about the prospects of the second phase, though I remain hopeful, just as somebody who's originally from Gaza and grew up there, that we really don't see the return of the war anytime soon.
Ahmed, as someone who grew up there, I just have to throw in one more comment into this tinderbox that you so eloquently describe. President Trump's recent remarks about taking over the Gaza Strip have sparked controversy, obviously. Is there anyone in Gaza paying much attention to this man and his wishes at this really critical moment in time?
Well, what's interesting is that on the one hand, there's been wide-scale and large-scale condemnation, dismissal of the idea, mocking of the concept, if you will. I mean, folks understand that it's not feasible, it's incoherent, and it reeks of the demeanor that we're so used to from Mr. Trump. On the other hand, and I think it's entirely fair and legitimate to acknowledge this, there are so many people in Gaza who are fed up with life under Hamas, who are fed up with life under repeated wars between Hamas and Israel, and the restrictions and the isolation that Gaza has been experiencing, who would absolutely welcome an opportunity to leave the Gaza Strip. And that's not because they're unpatriotic or don't care about Gaza or the Palestinian National Project, but they're exhausted, they're tired. They want life and safety for themselves and for their families elsewhere. They cannot take it anymore. And so there are actually, even well before Mr. Trump's plan, many Palestinians who would welcome an opportunity to leave Gaza and pursue life elsewhere, even if that's on a somewhat temporary basis, such that they can return in a decade or so when Gaza's rebuilt, when Gaza's transformed, when Gaza has a different future ahead. And so multiple things are true in that there's wide-scale kind of dismissal of the idea that the United States is somehow going to take over Gaza. On the other hand, people don't want to be held hostage by Hamas's nefarious armed resistance project. I'll leave you with this, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the withdrawal of Israeli settlements from Gaza, something that was supposed to be an opportunity for the people there. And instead of Gaza becoming the pride and joy of the Palestinian people, it became a platform for aid theft, squandering of billions of dollars of resources, and tens of thousands of lives lost. Something has got to change.
Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib, fascinating to get your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oliver McTernan is director of the organisation Forward Thinking and was involved in negotiations that led to the release of the Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in 2011. Though he has no formal role in the current talks, he regularly speaks with senior figures in both Hamas and the Israeli government. Thanks for being on the show today. Both sides have expressed outrage over the treatment and condition of the released individuals. Will this lead anywhere or pose an obstacle to the current deal?
Well, there is always the risk that it will. I think the whole process stretched over such a long period of time is so fragile that anything like this could derail it. I think we were all shocked when we see the condition of people coming out of prisons. But what struck me, it's remarkable that those 3 Israeli hostages came out alive, given the fact that for the past 15 months, we've had relentless bombing that has caused a third, not a third, but 3% of the population of Gaza, and 70% of those, I believe, are women and children. So it's a mixed feeling today. It's remarkable they're alive, but yet the condition they're in is extremely sad for them and the families.
Where will all this then lead, do you think? Do you have hope that this deal will go ahead, and where will it get the region?
Well, what worries me is the continuous statements of Benjamin Netanyahu that he wants to continue the war. It isn't, we were hoping when this ceasefire was announced that we would have the first stage of 6 weeks. We'd witnessed what we're seeing now. That would confidence build to take us into the second stage, where there could be real discussion on making this a permanent ceasefire. The noises roundabout, you might say, aren't encouraging. If the Prime Minister of Israel is saying, I want to continue this war, I want to complete my objective of seeing the total demise of Hamas, I think it isn't a good sign.
And what do you think about the US President's recent remarks about taking over the Gaza Strip, which have obviously sparked controversy? How could they impact negotiations?
Well, I think if Trump had calculated that this threat, you might say, would put pressure on Hamas to ensure the release of all the hostages, I think it's a misguided gesture, because I've found in the 20 years that I've been engaged in this region, and particularly in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, that military pressure and threats only deepen resistance. And I think we've seen that. I've always compare the first release of the hostages way back in November 23. It was a very modest affair, a very human affair, the handing over, the saying goodbye. What we've witnessed after 15 months of relentless military pressure, what we've witnessed is displays of defiance. And I think that underlines that argument. Threats are not part of real negotiations, sensitive negotiations that are required in situations like this.
Interesting analysis there from Oliver McTernan, director of the organisation Forward Thinking. Thank you.
Thank you.